Nice to see you folks today. Our talk today will be on ego and identity. Ego and identity are both made up of many different facets of your system. They evolve throughout your lifetime. You might feel that you are who you've always been in a way, and yet you also constantly change. You don't realize how you change along the way, though, quite often. You don't realize necessarily what experiences influence the formation and the development of your ego and your feeling of identity, who you perceive yourselves to be. If we start with the energy model, and we say that at this chakra level, 10, past life worldly karma influences your ego development. It influences your identity. It influences who you perceive yourself to be. That energy flows upward to the root chakra, sends energy there from your past lives, people you've been before, which influences who you perceive yourself to be today. That's a constant process. All the time it's happening. You don't know what's happening generally. You might not feel it, you might not perceive it. You may be able to do very little about the influence of those past life events on your current life, on the formation and formulation of your identity and your ego. Having said that, you can become conscious of it, you can modify it, you can understand it, you can understand the implications on your personal development and on how you feel about yourself all the time. Past life karma is only one influence. There are many, many others. The conditioning by your parents, the energies from your parents, the energetic connections from your parents, the beliefs that you were brought up with in regard to family, in regard to right and wrong, good and bad, what you believe society expects of you, the consensus consciousness connection, which is constantly feeding you information about what life is about or what it should be about, according to other people. All of those bits of information are flowing to you all the time. You could say they keep you energized as you. Now, obviously, your moods change throughout a day. Day after day after day. In a way, you fluctuate as an identity. You fluctuate as an ego. Some days you may feel very humble. Sometimes you might feel very powerless. Sometimes you might feel very powerful. You might be very egotistical at certain times. You might not know what triggers the bringing about or the creation of those particular internal states, which then get projected out to other people. Now, in addition to the subconscious components, the influence of parents, the past life karma, the beliefs that were pressed upon you sometimes, or at least you absorbed at some particular point in your life, you've made decisions. At every level of your system, at every point in your life, you've been making decisions about who you should be, who you want to be, why you want to be you, why it's good, or, believe it or not, why it's, quote, bad to be you. There's aspects of all of us that we don't like, that we don't accept, that we don't interact with well, that we don't feel good about. Everybody has them. Most of us attempt in some way to keep those parts of ourselves hidden. The aspects of ourselves that we don't respect, that we don't love, that we don't accept, that we don't cherish, that we don't understand sometimes. We try to keep those things hidden. And we're sure that no one else ever sees them, of course. You could call that process of managing your own ego components, managing your makeup or your costume in life. Do you ever see when someone's mask slips? Does that ever happen? Like the ego comes out and they're they either look angry, they look fearful, they look weak, they look guilty, shamed, something. Some aspect of themselves that they have not been able to mask, to inhibit comes out. And when that happens, how do you respond? Do you say, oh, it's good that you were able to express yourself? No? No? Do you ever look at that process and say, oh, look how they messed up? What a shame. Hope it doesn't happen again. Do you ever enjoy seeing another person's mask slip? Do you ever enjoy feeling a little bit up on the person? You know, look how good they've been doing, and all of a sudden, slip. Now I feel better because someone else has shown their weaknesses, has shown their vulnerabilities. Maybe not consciously, maybe not by choice, yet it happens. When it happens, other people sometimes step in to help. You ever tried to help someone save face? You ever heard that term? Oh, it's okay, don't worry about it, nobody saw, it's all right. They'll forget it by tomorrow. That process of helping other people manage their egos, and that process of managing our own egos, managing our own feelings of vulnerability, managing our own ongoing fears that bubble up in everybody, and that are triggered daily by thousands of different events. If you talk to somebody, if you interact with anyone, if you see something on television, if you're driving in your car and you happen to remember something that bothered you during the day or a year ago, it doesn't matter. That can trigger those feelings of vulnerability, weakness, fear, shame, regret, whatever. All of those are components of your ego. Your beliefs are components of your ego. A lot of people are willing to die for their beliefs. You see it happen every day. What's a belief? Anybody? Something you assume to be true, something you assume to be valid, something you assume to be valuable to hold on to as a point of reference in your internal thought process or in your decision-making process. You assume it's important. Do you have the same beliefs today that you had when you were 2 years old? You have some of them probably. And yet, many of them have changed. Or they've been layered onto. You held on to the 2-year-old beliefs. They're in your subconscious. They're as part of your ego. They're part of your subconscious or preconscious identity. Or, of course, all the beliefs from your past lives, because you still have them. Plus, all the ones that you consciously believe. This is what I believe. This is who I am. Unless I get stressed. Unless I get pressured. Unless there's a problem. And then all the other things come out. You ever seen anyone, a complete grown adult, a mature person, break down and start acting like a 2-year-old? Screaming and yelling and ranting and raving and not making any sense. Whatever sense is. Important word here, a part of their ego has presented itself, a component. Have you ever seen a mosaic? You know, a little picture made out of little chips of tile. I went to a church once, a really nice church, and I looked up at the ceiling and there were these beautiful angels in the ceiling, in the dome. And I thought, I want to go look at those angels. I want to see them up close. So I ran around and around and around up the stairs till I got up there. And when I got there, the angels were made of little chips of tile. And the little chips were not really chips of nice, cute, well-defined tile. They were little broken pieces of pottery that didn't match. The color was different. The shapes were different. It was not uniform at all. When you look at a person, if you stand back at a distance, you see something of the entirety of the person. If you were to focus in on a person with a microscope, do you think they'd look like a person anymore? You look right down in their pores. Would they look attractive? Would they look acceptable socially? All of those little parts of ourselves are very much like chips of a mosaic. They are expressions of ourselves that as a totality, they're kind of held together in a cloud, you might say. As a totality, they are a working mechanism of interaction with other people. Or sometimes they don't work so well. Sometimes they're dysfunctional. Have you ever seen someone with an ego that was running rampant? They wanted control, they wanted power, they knew everything. They were the only one who knew everything, by the way. They didn't want to listen to anyone else because that might taint the purity of their knowledge. That might degrade the quality of their expression of themselves. Or have you seen somebody who's lost in some negative emotion? Fear, shame, regret, guilt, anger. That's an expression of ego. That's an expression of a component of your identity. Just a little piece. And again, if we focus in on the little pieces of other people, they don't really look all that nice. They don't look like the whole person. If you've been married or been in a long-term relationship, you've probably seen several different parts of another person. Several different aspects of them that they do their very best to keep tightly under wraps throughout the day. Some of them have sharp corners. And you might need to be careful not to cut yourself on them. The process of living together tends to wear away and knock off some of the sharp corners. It might take a long time. It happens. It works. Relationships are a vital component, a vital part of our becoming aware of those parts of ourselves, the parts of our identities, the parts of our egos, the parts of our subconscious and our karma that bubble up and manifest themselves, sometimes unexpectedly. And we learn through that process of reflection. Oh, I lost my temper today, I got afraid today, I felt guilty today. And I see the reflection from another person going, ooh, don't do that. Put that back. And I can say, whoa, they reacted to me that way. I saw in their eyes that they didn't enjoy that aspect of my personality. I didn't even know I had that aspect of my personality. It comes out all the time, but no one ever told me. You ever heard the expression, having spinach in your teeth? The people who love you will tell you about the spinach in your teeth. The people who don't are going, oh, you look great. Going out there's a bunch of people who want to talk to you. So we all, sorry to tell you this, scary concept, perhaps, everybody's got spinach in their teeth all the time. Some people are better at talking like this so you can't see. It's not a bad thing. It's a part of humanity. It's a part of being a person. It's a part of your evolution. We are all climbing the ladder of consciousness every day. We are all becoming more aware every day. We are all learning to love and be kind and be gentle with each other and ourselves every day. Now, there's so many parts of us, you know, we're working with a lot of pieces here, a lot of pieces of this particular puzzle. And if you very clearly understand all of those pieces of the puzzle that make up you, if you see the totality of who you are consciously, then you're empowered to say, well, I don't know if I like that puzzle picture. Let's add a piece here, take out a piece there, and make it happier.
I have a question.
Please ask.
How does judgment fit in with ego?
That's a great question. Not only is our ego made up of our beliefs and our roles that we're taught, and the fears that we have, and the memories of guilt, shame, regret, things like that. The ego is also made up of our judgments our judgments of ourselves, our judgments of other people. Now, I know no one in here has any of those judgments, and it might be difficult to relate to. But if you can just imagine for a moment someone judging another person, if you can imagine that at the moment that they do, somewhere within them, in their ego, in their identity, they have decided that that person is not good enough, does not meet their standards, is not acceptable, is not worthy of love. Wow. Scary thought. Again, if you're judging someone, you cannot be loving them at the same time. They're mutually exclusive standpoints or perspectives. If you're loving someone, you cannot be judging them. So, if you're working with your ego and your identity, and you're in a state of judgment about yourself, what are you not in a state of? You're not loving yourself. You're not focusing your resources on your betterment. You're saying, schwack, I got to change. I'm not good enough. Now, how many people have been taught to grow in that way? Through self-punishment. Our ego evolves over time. Our identity evolves over time. Our consciousness evolves over time. The speed at which it evolves is significantly determined by the degree of consciousness we have, our intention to make that development and evolution happen, our awareness of the components of our ego and our identity. If you ask a lot of people who they are, oh, they say, I'm an architect. Oh, really? Oh. I'm a businessman. I'm a mother. I'm a father. And these are roles that they've been taught to play. These are who they perceive themselves to be in large part. Again, the word part is important here. They're playing a part. They're playing a role that they've scripted out for themselves in their subconscious, some aspect of themselves, and also partly in their conscious mind. So, is anyone just a business person? Is anyone just a plumber? No. Oh, well, what else are they? Who else are they? If they're not just a plumber, just a business person, just an architect, who are they?
They were once a child.
Sure.
They were once hurt by someone else in
Sure.
one way or another. And at the same time, they're a person who is constantly trying to find out who they really are.
That too. Who else are they?
We also take on the role of a parent, a brother, a sister, an aunt
True.
or an uncle, a cousin. We're many different roles.
True.
We may even be a plumber, an accountant.
So what's a very key component of ego and identity? Ready? Relationships. Definition of your relationships is an absolutely fundamental key component. Could you be a father without there being a child? Could you be a business person if you weren't in business with anyone and actually do the work? No. Well, you'd have no one to sell to. You'd have no one to buy your work. If there's nobody else out there, you can't play the role and have it be the complete role, because the role is always made up of your interaction with other people, at least at some point. if all of our roles and all of our identity and all of the components of ourselves are dependent upon reflection from someone else in order to be understood, in order to be perceived, are we who we are all by ourselves? No. Now, some people, believe it or not, are so lost in that process, they have no idea who they are. They have no feeling of a separate identity from other people. Their entire identity is perceived as a reflection of other people. They don't have the concept of me compared to you. People who are very codependent, by the way, and I'm not judging codependency here, I'm not saying that codependency is not good. It's a state of chosen interaction with other people and with yourself. Okay? If codependency is a state of constantly being aware of what other people need, or focused on other people, or not knowing where your boundaries are, or trying to control someone else to save them, or make their life better, or make them the way they should be, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's a process of learning just like any other. It's generally chosen at a subconscious level. So, if you see codependency in the context of the energy system, codependency in the context of the developing ego, codependency in the context of karma, codependency within the context of the developing conscious identity, and codependency within the context of interaction with other people, it could be seen as a state of imbalance. If I'm balanced internally and I know who I am, I know where I stand, I know who other people are, I'm able to maintain and manage myself, and I'm also willing consciously to respect their responsibility to manage themselves. Okay? You may have heard the term caretaker. You know, people who have addicts for husbands or wives, or their children are addicts, or their parents are addicts of one sort or another. Alcohol, drugs, work. You can be addicted to just about anything. The concept of ego and identity and codependency all relate in the relationship between a person who's a caretaker and a person who's addicted to something. Now, I'm not saying this in a judgmental way. I'm just trying to describe the situation as clearly as I can. Everyone on the planet, more or less, give or take, has something that they're not in balance about. Something they can't consciously say no to. Something you might say that they're addicted to one extent or another. They eat ice cream more than they, quote, should, more than is healthy for them. Or chocolate. Or they work too much, or they watch too much TV, or they spend too much time playing Nintendo. It's their choice. They've got free will. They can do it. And yet, from the standpoint of their ongoing evolution and development, it is dysfunctional. And they may not know it. The imbalances within a person that bring about that sort of situation are quite often subtle chemical imbalances. I don't mean the scientific range of imbalances that you might talk about with a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I'm not saying something that's fixed by Prozac. Or I'm saying that there are subtle energies within your system. There are subtle chemical responses to those energies. If you balance the energies, the chemicals balance, the person's emotions and mind balance, they feel good. They no longer have addiction. They no longer have an imbalance. They no longer have codependency, which is kind of an addiction. They no longer are caretakers to addicted people. Balance is the answer. Now, people who have a, quote, strong ego, they're not necessarily balanced. they may be very effective in their interactions with other people in a business context. They can have their will known and understood and respected. They can state what they want. They can try to push other people to give them what they want, when they want it, the way they want it. They can, quote, survive in a highly competitive environment. Having said that, that doesn't mean they're balanced. It means they're, to a degree, capable of surviving in a sometimes difficult environment. The United States is a wonderful place to live, and yet it is competitive. Yet there's a lot of stress. And yet there are a lot of expectations that people work. Focus on work. Check your emotions at the door. Check your beliefs at the door. So, if you've got ego and identity, which is made up of all the things we've talked about, beliefs, judgments, etc., and you're brought into a situation of high stress, high expectation, where you're told your personal beliefs, your personal identity, your personal ego, they don't count today. You don't get to be you today. What happens? Everybody's been in that situation. If you get pulled over by a police officer to give you a ticket, do you get to say, "Hey, how you doing, guy? Nice to see you. Oh, you got some food on your shirt. Spinach in your teeth." If you don't get to have that kind of interaction. If you do, you get another ticket perhaps. Not suggesting that their emotions have anything to do with their decision making in regard to nor their egos, nor their feelings of their identity, nor their feelings of their personal boundaries, nor their concerns over their personal power. The same with your boss. The same with your father and mother. Does everyone get to tell their father and their mother, "You don't know what you're talking about"? Nah, that's all baloney. I'm not listening to that. Some people, when they're adults, they do communicate with their parents that way. Yet when you're a kid, it's not usual. Or, if it happens, there's usually some response or reaction from the parent that's generally not pleasing for you. So do you see how the interaction and relationships affect the process of our evolution, of our identity, our ego, our decision-making processes in regard to those things, and how we present ourselves interactively and socially and interpersonally? Very important here. We're talking about interpersonal identity dynamics, interpersonal ego dynamics, and all those other sub-layers that we're talking about in regard to karma, in regard to beliefs, in regard to judgments, in regard to roles and energies and patterning we've received from parents. All of those things affect our ego, our perception of self, our perceived identity. How many of you really, truly are the identity that you perceive yourself to be? Almost nobody. If you could perceive yourself to be an immortal soul that's been incarnate many, many times, if you lived in that conscious awareness of who you are, do you think you'd make your decisions differently? Do you think you might relax a little more? No. Do you think you'd look at yourself with less judgment? Do you think you'd interpret your own ego process and identity process differently if you viewed it through the eyes of your soul?
It would be very difficult.
Difficult? Really? It depends on your perspective. It's actually, once you do that, it's easier. Yes. It's easier for a lot of different reasons, because when you are in your soul doesn't judge you. It doesn't judge itself. It doesn't judge this facade that you've created. It doesn't judge the way you talk, the way you walk, what you wear, what you eat, what you think, what you feel. It doesn't judge those things. Your soul is a spark of God. God is non-judgmental, all loving, compassionate, all forgiving. If you were that way towards your identity and your ego, do you think there'd be less internal conflict? Do you think you'd look at yourself less often, like, gosh, why did I make that stupid decision? I did it again. It's always that way. Yes.
I was reminded of the new word that's being thrown around lately of multitasking. So on top of all of us needing to do all these things, and then we have to be expected to be a multitasker. But I was coming to mind that what about the ego? If the ego seems to always be getting in the way, and as a human being, we are supposed to have this condition to learn our experiences, what would be, that means in the near future, if we all become more consciousness, the ego will actually, is that the objective of the world, of the universe in the near future?
Let's answer that from a variety of standpoints. First, people are being expected to multitask more. When you multitask, that means you don't focus on one thing very much. You're trying to focus on multiple things. As we've discussed, there's lots of parts of you that are going all different directions all the time, and you're constantly, believe it or not, negotiating with yourself over how you're going to present yourself. Oh, do I look good enough today? Did I wear the right clothes? Did I say that right? Did I express myself well? What are they thinking about me? Are they judging me? What are the implications of this choice? Now, when you take all that going on all the time, and you add the requirement by a lot of organizations, by a lot of people, the expectation, by the way, on their part that you multitask too. In addition, more stress, less quality quite often. Okay? Now, a really interesting, good thing, you might say, about the requirement of multitasking is, in order for you to multitask in a quality manner, you have to manage all that stuff better. Right? Because if you don't, you're juggling 12 plates, they're going to start hitting the ground. So it requires you to become somewhat more self-aware. Okay? Now, unfortunately, quite often that self-awareness brings about the following. Oh, I'm now self-aware that I have these 5 emotional responses in a business environment or in a relationship. None of them are facilitative of reaching the goals that other people expect. I don't have the tools to manage them. They're only emotional impulses that come out all the time. Judgments, fears, anger, guilt, whatever. Shame about myself as I'm trying to do well. So most people's answer to that is suppress it. Crush the part of yourself that doesn't fit. Make the square peg fit in the round hole. Make the part of yourself submit to the situation. Do you think that causes stress? Yeah. Do you think that we are, as a nation, not maybe a race around the world, do you think that that situation of suppression of emotion is continuing at a greater and greater rate? Faster and faster and faster? The more expectation, the more stress, the more pressure, the more repression of emotion. So certainly you may become more aware of how you feel. You may not be able to do anything about it, or at least not believe you can do anything about it. You ever heard the old expression, keep a stiff upper lip? Be strong, be enduring, be competent. Keep your facade, your expression of self, your supposed identity. Keep your makeup in place. Don't let your mask slip. We all have a tendency to try to do that. I apologize. The other half of your question.
What about in the future? Is that what is expected eventually? What will happen as a human race, that we will become more conscious, therefore the ego will be more suppressed?
You ever heard of a glass ceiling? It's a term that's been utilized for women in business, by the way, or other people in business. An invisible barrier. You can only go so far. Whether it's because of social convention, tradition, people who are in power not wanting other people to share the power, greed, whatever. There are many glass ceilings in the personal evolutionary process. Okay? Many. And you may bump into them over and over again, and it hurts. The process of becoming more conscious and more capable in terms of multitasking and things like that requires us, in the long run, to eventually learn how to deal with that situation in a positive way. Not suppress and not express, not crush other people with the parts of ourselves that we're unable to manage consciously. And when we do that, it creates if we don't manage ourselves, it creates a situation of minimized capacity, or at least not optimized capacity. Over time, the stress debilitates us. We either get sick, we get cancer, we die earlier, we don't function as well, we're not as competitive in the work environment, we're not as open and caring and loving in relationships, so we become dysfunctional. And we might be upset with ourselves about that, because we have an expectation of ourselves that if we were competent, if we were capable, if we were as powerful as we expect ourselves to be, if we met other people's expectations, then that wouldn't be that way, right? Everything would work great. We must be doing something wrong. It's not that you're doing something wrong. It's not that anybody's doing anything wrong. It's just that they don't have the tools and methods to manage their life in a peaceful way, in a stress-free way, and in a conscious way, so that they can say, oh, part of myself reacted to this situation. Think I'll release it. Think I'll let it go. Think I'll manage it. Think I'll understand it. I think I won't suppress it, because that would just cause more stress and use up necessary energy. Vital life force is utilized unnecessarily when we create a state of internal conflict. Stress. Are we in the future supposed to go beyond that? Supposed to? There's a implied judgment there, as if we don't, and I apologize, not that you have it, it's built into the language. We have a belief that there are things we're supposed to attain. Expectations of self, spiritual expectations, future expectations for ourselves as individuals and for the race as a whole, for our families, for the people we care about, for the people who live down the street that should be living the way we expect them to. Yes, we're going to get there. Yes, we do need to get there consciously. Yes, the key to getting there consciously, the key to freeing ourselves, is to release all judgments of self and other people. And you say, well, that'd be chaos. If you can't control people, they just run wild. Not a lot of trust in that perspective, by the way. Not a lot of belief in the potential of humanity. Not a lot of focus on loving and accepting other people with compassion and wisdom. Not a lot of belief in facilitating other people's development. So, yes, we are supposed to attain those things. Yes, we will attain those things. Yes, the road is self-awareness, consciousness, management of self, unconditional, non-judgmental love for ourselves and other people, and attainment of wisdom in the process. We all have that capacity. It's going to work out better if we all help each other get there. Now, certainly we help each other save face. We help each other keep our egos in place, by the way. That's not all that functional. That is a glass ceiling in our personal development that we're all helping each other keep in place, by the way. In the long run, you might have heard the term the death of the ego, as if the ego was a bad thing, as if those subconscious components of ourselves and what we perceive to be our identities, as if they were a bad thing. They're not a bad thing. You've heard of obsolete technology? We don't still use horse and buggy very much. We've gone to cars. When we make something, we don't go to the blacksmith to make it out of metal. We may have it manufactured in a big plant somewhere. We no longer use candles unless we want to. We use electric lights. Those other technologies have become obsolete. The identity and the ego as it has existed in the past are becoming obsolete. That's really important. Now, that doesn't mean we should cast them aside. Oh, look, they're obsolete, they're bad, we should judge them. It means that we need to identify and define a path of personal transformation that shifts us from an ego-based state, a past life karmic identity state, a role-based state, of, the way we've been trained by parents and society to act. Step away from tradition. As nice as tradition is, it can be incredibly limiting because we're in a time of transformation. If we try to hold on to the past and to value it more than loving each other, there's a problem. If we value it more than caring for and loving for ourselves, there's a big problem. I have to have everything this way at Christmas. I have to have everything this way at Thanksgiving. I have to have everything this way if I'm going to go out in public. If I put those constraints on myself from a traditional standpoint, I'm incapacitating myself in regard to going to something beyond that. So, you've all seen bicycles with training wheels. When you're a little child, training wheels are a good thing. They keep you from falling over. You've seen these little walkers that 2-year-olds or 1-year-olds have. They can run all over the house, toddling along, just their toes touching the ground. They can't fall down, which is good, maybe. But they get stronger and they get into the idea, the concept of walking. And for a time, those things are beneficial. For a time, training wheels and other devices, if we could call them that, of society and of internal function, serve a purpose, a valuable purpose. And yet, if you've had training wheels on your bicycle, you realize that at some point it becomes very difficult to ride the bike with the training wheels. If they get caught on a tree as you're driving by or riding by, they might hurl you to the ground. You can't turn smoothly with training wheels. They stop you from turning smoothly. They stop you from attaining higher degrees of sophisticated proficiency in the operation of the vehicle. Okay? Now, this is a vehicle. It's a vehicle of evolution. Do you want to keep the training wheels in place or not? It's up to you.
How can we identify those limitations so that we know where to start?
Good question. What's the difference between a stepping stone and an anchor? The difference is whether you're stuck to it or not. If you've got glue on the bottom of your shoes and you're walking across stones in a creek, they're keeping you out of the water, but you start dragging them. Can be problematic. All beliefs have a shelf life of validity. All perspectives have a shelf life of usefulness and validity. All understandings have a shelf life of usefulness and validity. It's up to you to identify when they've gone bad. When you might not want to eat this can of peaches. Identifying the parts of yourself is the first step. The beliefs. Identifying your judgments of yourself and other people. Identifying your expectations. Identifying your fears. Identifying your roles. Identifying your karma. Identifying the influences, energetic and emotional and will-based from parents. Identifying their expectations of you. The conscious awareness of all of that is the first process of inventorying who you are. Mapping your identity. If you're not aware of those things, are they influencing you anyway? Yeah. Are they driving your bus? You're sitting in the back and don't know it, and there's somebody up there deciding where you're going to go, how you're going to get there, and when you're going to arrive. And it's not your conscious mind. Now, if you go ahead and you do map your identity and your ego, and you do become conscious of it, and you do, through that process of becoming conscious of your ego, evaluate each of those components of yourself. Evaluate your beliefs, your expectations, your understandings about life, what you think you know, and do a determination. Make a determination of whether they are still valid for you. Now, you might believe, now I'll tell you a secret here. I read people's energy all day long. That's what I do for a living. I help them shift their energy. I help them shift their beliefs. I help them shift their perspectives and understandings about themselves and other people and relationships and interactions, their interpretations of events, all those things. I help them change their history. Help them change their karma, what happened in the past. Reinterpret it. When you reinterpret the past, you see the now differently. It's like time travel. You go back, you change it, it ripples through to who you perceive yourself to be today. You see life differently. The important thing to understand in that process is that it's got to be done consciously if you want to be able to determine what the probable results of the change are going to be. Your personal values drive that process. At least they can. Or your ego can. Or your subconscious, or your karma can, or your mom and dad can, vicariously. Or again, your consciousness can. So, in answer to your question, if a person evaluates those components of themselves and understands what they mean, understands their value or their lack of value, understands the empowerment that they give or the limitation that they create, then you can regulate it. Like the thermostat in your house. It's a little hot, I think I'll turn it cooler. Gosh, it's cold in here, let's increase the heat. You can manage your own. You have thousands of thermostats, by the way, in your system. You call them beliefs, you call them judgments, you call them roles, you call them expectations, you call them values. All of those things, all of those internal orientation points for your consciousness, your subconscious, your karmic pasts, all of them are constantly adjusting who you think you are, who you feel you are, how you experience life, what decisions you make, why you make them, how you go about enacting them, and thus the results you get from your choices. So I'd simply suggest that if you look at your beliefs, values, expectations, judgments, etc., and you say, do I need this? Does this serve my highest and best good? Does this bring me joy? Does this improve my life? Does this improve the lives of others? You might get very deeply into it and say, I wonder how this affects the lives of other people. And you could spend a long, long time evaluating and analyzing, and you'd learn a lot. And I'm not suggesting not doing that. That's a form of analytical meditation, you might say. Very beneficial process. Having said that, in today's high-speed world, high-pressure world, if you want to simplify all this down, if you look at every aspect of yourself and say, does this aspect of myself or this relationship that I'm in, or this interaction that I'm having, or this way of expressing myself, or this way of receiving from other people, does it serve me? Is it in my highest and best good? Is it in the highest and best good of other people? If it's not, if you determine through your eyes that it's not, you can choose to change it. You can choose to be different. You can shift your identity. You can adjust your ego.
Can you identify or define shift?
Sure. Oh, you want me to actually tell you? Very good question. Let's take an example. Another secret. Again, reading people is what I do, and almost everybody I read has some belief either that they or somebody else, somewhere within them, they have a belief that they or somebody else are bad. Now, bad is like an undefined term, right? Yet it's not good. It's not positive. It's not what we want. So have you ever heard the expression, men are all bad, or women are all bad, or that person is bad, or politicians are bad, or lawyers, or whatever? Those are beliefs. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody acts on them as directly as that. I'm not saying that they go out and hunt down people that they don't believe are good people. Again, you've got thousands of beliefs within you about life and yourself. And all of them are constantly negotiating at subconscious levels to determine how you're going to choose to respond to any particular interaction, any particular event or relationship. So, what I mean by shift is, if you let go of a belief, and you can do that, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can, with determination within yourself, eyes closed, focus on the belief. If you have had experiences in life that have told you that my mom is bad, or my dad is bad, or my children are bad, or I'm bad, or the people down the street are bad, whatever, you can, with determination in the core of your being, state the following: I choose to give up this belief now. And that'll shift things. Because you've applied your consciousness, you've applied your will, you've applied your energy, you've applied your intention. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that we don't have, by the way, the same beliefs scattered through different parts of our systems. You ever heard of cellular memory? You know, they have people who get heart transplants. You know, somebody who's never smoked in their life gets a heart transplant from a smoker, and they wake up and the first thing they want is a cigarette. That's been documented, by the way, and they've never met the people who gave them the heart. Or they want a beer and a pizza, and they don't drink beer. Our memory doesn't just happen up here. It happens in every cell of our body. It also happens in all of the energy around every cell in our body. Okay? So you can store a belief in your feet, in your hands, in your heart, in your liver, in a kidney, in your hip, anywhere. You may have heard the expression, I've got a bad knee. Well, I've literally worked on people who have the belief I'm bad in their knee. And their knee hurts, by the way. Because in some part of themselves, they're literally attacking themselves with their own self-judgments. That belief is what you might term an energetic thought form. Okay? It's kind of a bubble of energy. Now, if anybody here seen a marble statue? Yeah. Can you imagine for a moment a statue made of marbles glued together? Well, in a way, we're like that. We're like that in this way. All of those little bubbles of beliefs and energies are stored energetically and cellularly throughout our bodies. When you hear in your mind a voice, everybody hears them. You can admit it. It's okay. Your ego and your identity need not shield you from that. It doesn't mean you're crazy. When you read a book, can you hear your own voice talking to yourself?
Yeah.
Can you play music you've heard in your own mind and tap your foot to it? You can have auditory memory. Can you hear your mother and father's voices in your own mind if you choose to? You've got a recording in there. Your whole body is a recorder. Your energy system is a recording device. That relates to ego and identity. Okay? Who you think you remember yourself to be is often whom you attempt to project yourself to be in the now and in the future. Go ahead.
How come when you get to certain age, like maybe 80s, 90s, you don't remember?
Oh.
You lose your memory? You remember like maybe certain scenes, but the recording is what? Kapoom?
That's a very good question. With age, we often get some degree of decreased functionality, either chemically or energetically within a person's system. Some of our organs don't work as well. If you've had a lifetime of living with internal conflict, self-judgment, self-abuse in some cases, do you think that takes a toll on your body? I've worked on multiple people who have hearing deficits. Okay? I've worked on people who work on them for 10 minutes, and after 10 years of not hearing out of an ear, they hear. Okay? And you think, oh, it's a miracle. Well, no. It's energy. Okay? They hear. They can put the phone on the other ear and still talk to me. Quite often, the reason that they couldn't hear out of that ear, I psychically intuit. I pick up a thought form in that ear or in their ear canal or in the part of their brain which processes sound says, there are some things in life I don't want to hear. There are some things in life it hurts to hear. At a subconscious level, they make the determination that they don't want to hear certain things, therefore they shut down the mechanism. How many people lose their hearing later in life? How many people lose their vision later in life? How many people see things in a lifetime they'd rather not see? How many people in a lifetime see things about themselves they'd rather not become aware of? In their mind's eye, so to speak, and it affects their vision. Just becoming more aware of yourself isn't necessarily the most happy experience. Becoming self-aware is not always pleasing and joyful. Becoming self-aware, if you can do so with love, non-judgment, unconditional love for yourself, it's joy. It's adventure. It's excitement. It's getting to a point of understanding of yourself you've never been to. It's climbing a mountain and getting to the top. And that's beautiful. It's great. It's a fantastic experience. And yet, people haven't been taught to get there without kicking themselves up the hill. They haven't been taught to love themselves along the way. So, they get some physical dysfunction in the process. In addition to that, in terms of brain function, you've heard of people becoming senile and things like that, or not remembering what happened yesterday, or having distorted perspectives on things periodically. They're not always like that. They have good days and bad days, you might say. Brain function changes with age. The energy, the way it flows through your brain, changes with age. If you do Qigong regularly, Qigong, a moving meditation it's called, it's a movement of energy that you can manage consciously if you so choose. If you do Qigong daily, you move life force through your system. You circulate it. Energy is supposed to circulate through your system all the time. How many people's energy generally circulates naturally like their blood flow? Your nervous system is an energetic circulatory system. Your blood circulates. Various fluids circulate through your body. Energy flows through your body, not just in terms of chemical energy, like getting energy from food. Life force circulates through your body if you choose to manage it consistently so that no matter what your life experiences are, you don't reach a state of dysfunction due to lack of good energy flow. Now, again, a lot of people don't like to think about certain things. If you have a lot of self-judgments and you reach a late stage of life and you're looking at, maybe 5-10 years left to go, and you look back and you say, gosh, what's my life now? I really don't want to think about that. What happened years ago? A lot of painful things. I don't want to think about that. I'm going to be dying within this amount of time, probably, and I don't want to think about that. Do you think there's motivation there to have dysfunction here? Do you think everybody knows that?
No.
Do you think they want to know it? No. Do you think part of them is making a decision for them at a subconscious level to determine the quality of function of their minds, or their eyes, or their ears, or their bowels, or their heart, or their lungs, or their liver, any part of their system? You have the God-given right of free will. Now this is an incredibly important thing I'm about to say. Okay? You have many, many parts to your system. We've talked about the karma, the roles, the stored beliefs, the ego, the identity, the consciousness, the energy system, all those things. It's not just your mind that has free will. Every part of you has free will. You have the subconscious free will to make yourself ill if you choose. You have the subconscious free will to interact energetically with someone else very negatively, even though you're consciously smiling and having a good time. You're saying, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Die. Die now. Subconsciously, believe it or not, people actually send energy like that. And it doesn't mean they're bad people. It means that a part of them is angry, upset. A child part might be enraged. And it's got energy of its own. It's got free will of its own. Therefore, it can act on its own. And on its own, it creates negative karma that you'll have to live with at some point in the future. So is conscious awareness and conscious management of your ego, your identity, your subconscious, your karma a good thing? If you got to live with the results, would you prefer to be disciplined about how you manage yourself? Not repressive, not self-punishing, conscious, focused, aware, wise, and loving. You have a question?
You brought to mind about the ego and selfish, being selfishness.
Hmm.
What happens to the child, to the new parents that having a child and they spoil the child rotten, and
There's no judgment there.
that child unknowingly. I believe a lot of parents do that unknowingly because that's their treasure and they spoil the child with all the things in life, material wise and everything, their time, and on top of that, the child has ego anyway, like all
We
of us.
all do.
Can you clarify what would happen to that child, or what are the consequences and
How about the implications? Because with implication, we don't say it's a good or bad result. We just say this is what's going to happen. This is how the dominoes tend to fall, rather than judging the result. Judgment, by the way, is ingrained in every single thing we do in a day. Every interaction, every relationship. You judge the people you talk to and you don't even know it. You don't even realize it's happened quite often. So, very important question. If a person has a child and they give a lot to the child, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Giving a lot of love to a child, that's not a bad thing. Now, there's a big difference between giving a child love and giving them attention. Attention's a part of it, that's true. Facilitating them in attaining certain perspectives in life that are beneficial for them, that are in their highest and best good. Helping them gain the capacity to evaluate their own values, to evaluate their own decisions, to understand the implications of those decisions, to understand how to manage the results of their decisions. Beneficial things. A lot of people don't do that. They try, but it's tough, especially in today's heavily stressed world. You talked about multitasking. Well, trying to raise kids in today's world, you're really multitasking. Do we really have the focus of energy and comprehensiveness of facilitation of the development of children today that we had 50, 60 years ago? Are children paying the price? Are they becoming dysfunctional? How many kids are ADD, ADHD? How many kids are acting out emotional problems? How many kids are, taking guns to school or whatever? How many kids are not knowing where they fit? How many kids are turning to drugs? How many kids are not seeing a positive future? How many kids don't know how to love themselves?
You mentioned time because the parents don't have the time, or they give too much time
And attention.
and attention, but then could it be that they also are going through a guilt trip because they don't have the time,
Absolutely.
the quality time?
If you have an expectation of yourself as a mother or a father to always be a good mother and father, can you always do that all the time, every day, no matter what, in today's world? Now, whatever a good mother or father is for you, in your determination, in your conditioning from parents, in your self-expectation, in what you've gleaned from your past lifetimes and your current lifetime. Those expectations can be crushing. You can crush yourself under your own expectations, under your own self-judgments. Do you think that helps your kids? Oh, but aren't you being a better mom or dad? If you just hammer yourself mercilessly to fulfill your own expectations of motherhood or fatherhood, doesn't that benefit your child? Aren't they happier? Oh, they don't see what's going on in you, do they? They know. They know. They pick up on it. They feel it. Children are very intuitive. They may not know all of the things that you go through in a day at work or between you and your spouse, all that. They may not really understand all of those details the way you would as an adult in your mind, but they get it. It makes an impact on them. Believe it or not, illness in children is quite often directly related to either lack of balance or internal conflict or karma of the parents. Now, I'm not saying that to create a guilt trip for people out there whose kids are not well. Okay? Nobody's failed anybody here. If you, and by the way, pets get sick when their owners are heavily stressed. They try to take on the difficulties that the owners are facing out of love. Children can feel responsible for their parents. So when a parent is trying to manage the development of their child, and they're, quote, giving them too much love and attention and spoiling them rotten, what's the motivation within the parent? Is it a conscious, heart-centered motivation to facilitate the development of the child in the highest and best way they possibly can? Sometimes. Is their motivation, I was never good enough as a child, I'm trying to make up for that by being a better parent, therefore I'm going to give and give and give and give all the time so that I can feel better about me? Or so that I don't have to judge myself as not being good enough as a parent? Those are tough questions. That's a very difficult thing for a person to assess, especially themselves alone, because their ego is trying to defend itself. Their ego is trying to say, I've got to be a good person. I want to be a good person. This is the way I was taught to be a good person. If I don't meet my parents' expectations of what being a good parent is, then I'll have a feeling of abandonment, by the way, by my parents. I'll feel that I did not fulfill their expectations, and people are terrified of feeling abandoned. I'll abandon myself through my own self-judgment. I'll undermine my own good feelings about myself. My ego will get terrifically bruised, perhaps. I will negate myself in a way through self-judgment. I'll undermine my own energy, my own health, by trying to meet some expectation that was formulated who knows how many generations back and handed down to me and my family. And I'm supposed to, by the way, respect it. Because if I don't, again, I'm being disloyal, I'm not being loving to my parents, I'm not being a good kid, I'm facing the potential of being rejected emotionally. All of those things get handed down to us generation by generation, and not just by our families, by our country that we live in or by our town. We pick up on that stuff, it affects us, and we try to conform. We try to be good Americans. We've got to have our lawn mowed. We've got to have the house painted. We have to meet the expectations of all our neighbors. So when you talk about what the influences are on a child's development, all of those come into play, plus the desire of the parent. Kids know when you love them, by the way. They really do. And yet, if you in your heart are loving them, and yet at the root chakra you have a whole different projection of energy, because you don't accept yourself at the root chakra subconsciously. You never felt accepted by your parents. You never felt you were good enough. Consciously, you want to be a good parent. And yet, on the right side here, this woman had a very negative relationship with her father. She's got a son. Subconsciously, she's got anger at men. And she's got anger at the male side of herself, at the male part of her identity, at the male part of her ego. She was treated negatively by a male. She generalized it. And men do this with women, by the way. Or they do it with their fathers. So it can be either parent, it can be either sex, or both. We adopt those perspectives. They get ingrained, they get recorded in our cellular memory or our energetic memory. They influence and filter the energy that flows through our system and taint it in a way sometimes, or distort it, or interrupt it, or block it. And while we're trying to love in our heart, and we're really, really, really trying, our subconscious may be saying, it's a bad kid. Because we see the child as a reflection of ourselves as a child. We're still in judgment of ourselves as a child. We project that onto the child because in a significant way we see the child as a reflection of ourselves. Right?
Yep.
Yeah, you know, when they talk the same way, they look the same way, they act the same way, and we see in them something about ourselves we don't like. Well, they're a bad kid, they deserve punishment. The anger's coming from anger at ourselves, and we project it onto them. We desire strongly, by the way, to love our children, obviously. And yet, when we criticize them, when we judge them, when we don't accept them, it's generally speaking not because they're a bad kid. It's generally speaking, although we don't know it, because they are showing us something of ourselves, or at least the result of our choices, our behaviors, our influences, that we really don't like and don't want to deal with and are in significant judgment of. So, if you want to love your kids and you want to give them true love from your heart all the time, true conscious awareness of who they are as an individual, facilitation to attain their highest and best good, how important is it for you to heal your own judgments? How important is it for you to manage your own expectations of yourself? How important is it for you to let go of subconscious roles that are influencing and impacting your life and trying to, quote, force you or motivate you to be a good mother, a certain kind of good mother, or a good father, a certain kind of good father? Until you're aware of the situation, can you change it for the better? No. No. Having said that, we're all human. Okay, we all are in a state of development. We're not making mistakes. We're learning in the school of hard knocks. Nothing that we have ever done is worthy of being judged for. Nothing we could do is worthy of being judged for. If you can work from that perspective of non-judgmental love, unconditional love of self and others and child or children, you can give the best. And you don't, quote, end up with a spoiled, rotten child. You end up with a conscious, aware, wise child who's able to work in this world with all its rapid transformation. They're empowered to be who they choose to be consciously, rather than getting all caught up in the stuff that we try to push on to make them good. If that makes sense. So, you shift from this picture to something that might be called a more positive picture of loving, conscious interconnectedness at all levels. They can learn from you. They can accept who you are at all levels because you accept who you are at all levels. And when that happens, they can accept who they are at all levels. I think they call that loving harmony. I think they call that a road to family peace. And if you do this in your family, and if everyone else in the world does that in their family, what does that do for the world? Peace, joy, harmony, happiness, excitement, adventure, in a nice way. It's all your choice. Working with your ego and identity is a powerful way to improve your life, to understand yourself, to understand your relationships, to bring yourself joy, peace, and harmony. And now, let's move to fragmentation and integration of consciousness, a process of showing you how to integrate your past, your present, your future, and all of the various aspects of your being, your mind, your emotions, your thoughts, your beliefs, all aspects of your consciousness into a very powerful and beautiful now. How many people here are aware of all the fragments of your consciousness that you have like laying around in various places?
How many do we have?
Some of you have millions and millions and millions. What's a fragment of consciousness? It could be, or it could be a really big piece.
Is it a piece of consciousness that you're not necessarily aware of?
It could be one you're aware of, one you're not aware of, one you're semi-aware of, one you're sometimes aware of, to some extent, or sometimes fully aware of, more or less. How many of you have experienced time? Time is a kind of invention we have to describe change, to map it, to monitor it, to compare it, to dice it up, to analyze it. That's all time is. It's an invention. It doesn't exist. We apply it. You ever seen a cookie cutter? You roll out this big piece of dough, and then you dice it into little pieces based upon whatever the cookie cutter is you're using. If you could imagine for a moment that you've diced up your life, which is an entirety, a whole, a complete experience, that you've diced it up in some manner. How do you dice it up? What's the cookie cutter like? What shapes it? What determines where you apply it? What determines the shape of the dough that you call your memory, by the way, sometimes, your experience? You apply your beliefs.
Or conditioning, experience.
True. Parental conditioning, life experience conditioning, society's conditioning. All of those influences and a lot more determine what you take from any experience. Believe it or not, every time you have an experience, you filter it. You dice it up. You take out what you see as important and you focus on that. And then you remember that. If you remember even that, consciously. Subconsciously, you may remember much more. Yet consciously, what you're able to refer to later might only be that which you prioritized, that which you validated the existence of, that which you believed in. When the first men landed on the moon, do you think it shook a few people up? When they first found out that the world wasn't flat, did it shake some people up? Their belief systems limited their capacity to bring in new concepts, new experience, new information, put non-judgmentally. There's no right or wrong, it's just information. Thus, they were limited in what they were able to do with that information once they limited it, or filtered it, or blocked it, or denied it, or distorted it, or invalidated it. We all have those things within us. We all have those beliefs. We all have those cookie cutter processes. And the cookie cutter processes dice up our experience of reality. You ever see a mirror broken on the ground? And if you were to look in it and look at your own reflection, do you think you'd see little pieces of you? Yeah, not the entirety, not all of you. There'd be blank spots, spots you couldn't see yourself reflected in. You could call those parts of your subconscious. You could call those spaces between the mirror, if you were to look at your memory of yourself, as things that you have either distorted or blocked or limited or decided not to remember, that you'd rather forget. You ever heard people talk about the past as the good old days? Everything was great then. There were no problems. We didn't have fighting, war, famine, disease, political fights. We didn't. That's not true, right? They did have that. There's always been those things. There are always I won't say always, yet they might continue for a considerable amount of time. It's possible. We selectively remember. We cookie cut the past. Oh, no, no, that fight was your fault. I was the victim. Right? You were abusing me. It wasn't a mutual thing. I didn't say anything mean. Or if I said anything mean, it was only because you said it first. I had to defend myself. We dice up our consciousness any way it suits us. We dice up our memory any way it suits us. We dice up our experience any way it suits us. You've ever heard the expression that the winners write history?
Yeah, winners. Yes.
The people who win the war write the history.
Yeah.
The people in power write the history. And then they get to refer to it as if they were nice and good and everyone else was the bad guys. It happens. There is a memory in the world. There's a memory in every nation. There's a memory in every city and town and corporation or company or group of people. There's a memory in every family. Do your parents remember everything the same way you remember it? Oh, come on now. They agreed with exactly what you thought, right? So do you see, if you were to look at the entire bubble of consciousness of the planet, that it's kind of a bit fragmented, a bit segmented, a bit distorted. Yes.
It just brought a thought to my mind. Is that why people, there's some people who consider themselves a victim and they get stuck in that
Sure.
being a victim and they can never move beyond it, and it's because they perceive themselves as being the good guy in the situation?
Great question. Great question. And I've got to start out by asking, are there any victims?
No.
Now that's a tough question. Now come on now. There's people out there that are shot and killed that by people they've never met before every day. True? In this lifetime. There are people out there that are hurt, that are physically abused, emotionally abused, mentally abused, and spiritually abused every day by people they've never supposedly met before. So aren't they victims? They're innocent. What did they do to deserve that? Okay. Let's give you a metaphor here. Karmically speaking, by every choice we make, we are affecting our future. Just like dominoes. Oh, I'll push down this domino. It's going to ripple off into that result in the future. If I push that one, it'll ripple off into a different result. I may not see the results. Now, if we could imagine here for just a moment that I'm standing here and there's a wall that divides me from the future. But I can reach through it with my hands. And I could carve something or shape clay, say. I could do an artistic work. And I'm doing a, what do they call it, a bust? I'm creating a picture of me in clay on the other side, right? But I can't see it while I'm doing it. And I think I'm doing really good. My ego says I'm doing really good too. I'm patting myself on the back. Yeah, this is going to turn out great. And then I get to step forward 10 years from now or a lifetime from now and look at my creation. And I go, ooh, gosh, why did they do that to me? How did that happen? How have I been victimized by life? Why doesn't God love me? Why don't everyone else that I interact with, why don't they love me? Reason being, I've made choices based upon what I knew in the past, which isn't nearly what I know now. I have created that future for myself. Now that doesn't mean that other people don't affect us. Okay? We're so subconscious in many levels, so unconscious at many levels, so influenced by so many things, as a part of this giant karmic play that the whole planet's in. We are so much influenced, kind of like being tossed around like a cork on the ocean. At least it seems like that, until we become conscious and learn to move under our own power, our own conscious choice, and to make choices in a conscious way. We're so influenced by that process as a race that we've developed a way to try to see ourselves in a positive light, in spite of our choices. And we call that victimhood. We call that, they're the bad guys, I'm the good guy. Now in this lifetime, you may strive every single moment of your life and your day to be, quote, a good person. You work at it diligently. You put your heart and soul into it. You sacrifice to do it. You stress yourself out. You judge yourself. You might even be merciless in regard to yourself. Non-compassionate, non-forgiving of yourself in order to, quote, be a good person. Right? How many people do you know who do that? If not openly in their own hearts, in their own minds. A lot of people. Through that process, they feel they're improving themselves. They're becoming better. Having said that, how many people have seen, quote, bad things happen to good people? Yeah. Seemingly innocent people. Yes, quite often. Innocent people, children, little tiny babies. How many people starve around the world each day? How many children are blinded by malnutrition, literally blinded, they lose their sight every single day. We become numbed to it, insensitive to it. We see it every day in some form on CNN or news shows. Because if we were to focus on what might be termed the truth of the matter, or what seems to be happening out there, it would be very painful. And a lot of people would feel very personally responsible for not, quote, being good enough to have done something positive to change the world in another place where people are suffering. We can love in a detached way without sacrificing ourselves. I'm not suggesting that self-sacrifice isn't sometimes beneficial. I'm simply suggesting that having internal balance, self-love, and love of others consistently facilitates us in working with situations like that. So could you say, we just talked about fragmentation of consciousness. Could you see that your experience of life is kind of fragmented from past, present, and future? Time seems to dice it up, the cookie cutter of time. Can you see that your life experience is fragmented across lifetimes? So every lifetime you've got a subconscious mind. Every lifetime you've got karma. Every lifetime you've got influence by parents and society. Every lifetime you've got your own decisions, your own choices. That's all kind of divided up, right? At least it seems to be. Now, if you get to a point where you can love yourself completely enough and accept yourself completely enough and become healed enough, it is feasible, it is possible to kind of reach out with your intention and take all those pieces of the mirror that have been spread across 100 lifetimes perhaps, and to bring them all together to see yourself as a picture of who you are, more completely, more truly, who you've been, who you want to be, what you've experienced, and integrate it all into one moment of consciousness you call now. You can do it. What inhibits that process, though? Why don't you remember it all? Karma. Yeah, karma. You might not want to remember it. If it's negative karma, if you went to war and killed people, if you were abusive as a person to another person, if you stole, if you harmed other people, if you failed yourself in some way, if you judged yourself rightly or wrongly, if there is such a thing, If you did all of that, do you think that you're going to want to remember? No. And is it necessarily beneficial that you remember? Could you go through your day-to-day life right now if you were consciously aware of all of those instances of experience, going back perhaps thousands of years, that might have been very painful? You know, say you've died 100 times. You really want to remember that? All the time? I'm trying to make a decision at the grocery store about what bread to buy or what milk to buy. Oh gosh, they ran a sword through me in that lifetime. Going over to buy cookies. Oh gosh, they lopped off my head in this other lifetime. You don't want to remember that. It takes away from your focus of the moment. At the same time, would it be nice to reflect upon, gosh, you know, in this lifetime I was a great farmer. I loved the land. I loved the plants. I got to wake up every morning and go out and milk the cows and get the eggs from the chickens and really enjoy life and felt like I was one with the earth at that time. Would it be kind of nice to be able to reflect upon that if you chose to? There's a lot of good there. There are a lot of nice moments. And yet, in the current process that we follow, we choose to separate that from our conscious experience of this life. Again, in a way it's beneficial. If you've lived 50 lifetimes in 30 different countries, do you think you're going to have picked up some culture and tradition along the way? What if you tried to apply that to where you were right now?
You would freeze up.
You go on tilt. It wouldn't work. It would cause conflict. You ever heard of the expression, when in Rome, do as the Romans?
Yes.
Well, when alive, do as wherever you are. Live as the people that you live with, to a degree at least. Because we haven't yet achieved a high enough level of conscious awareness to be able to embrace and forgive and integrate all of that experience from all of those lifetimes into now in a harmonious way and love ourselves and everybody else, no matter how mean they were, in all those lifetimes. Right? So, is judgment and anger and fear and guilt and shame, all of those things keeping us from being whole? You ever heard the term all of a piece? It's an old term. It's kind of like being whole, being complete, being all that you are, and knowing it. You can be that way. Do you think some of us drag pieces of us behind us like anchors? Whether from this lifetime or another lifetime? We do. They inhibit us from moving smoothly through life. Subconscious levels, we're beating ourselves up about something unnecessarily. We're wasting energy that we could be using on enjoying life. We're wasting energy and time and focus on things that could, or if we didn't focus on them, we could use that energy associated with that misapplied focus on loving each other, on loving ourselves, on experiencing life more fully, more joyfully, and being more to each other. Would that be a good thing? Would that be a powerful thing?
Yes.
If you could take all of the energy that you've spread across 50 lifetimes of decision making and action and choices and emotion, all of that energy associated with all that, and you could let all that go, all the seeming past, bring all that energy right here, right now. Is there anything you could not do? Is there anything, any person you could not be? Is there any state of consciousness you could not achieve? No. Is there any happiness you could not experience? No. Fragmentation of consciousness inhibits potential, attainment of potential. Fragmentation of consciousness inhibits application of conscious will. Fragmentation of consciousness debilitates us. It keeps us in the past or thinking about the future even. If we're constantly focused on the future rather than where we're at the moment, putting energy into the future because that's what's important, right? All this now stuff. You ever seen people who are stuck both in the past and in the future? They have no clue what's happening right now. And you say, focus on this. And they say, well, no, I've got to get this done. I've got to get this thought through about how I'm going to live someday rather than how I'm living now. Those kinds of folks, which we all are to one degree or another at some point in our lives, don't have the option because of their focus, where their focus is at that moment, of focusing themselves, their hearts, their souls, their minds, their intentions, their energy on this moment, here and now. They don't have that option because they're fragmented. And they may not know it. Often they don't know it. Often they feel like they are supposed to focus on the future. You got to build a secure future. That's what a wise person does. Or you got to follow tradition. That's what a good son or daughter does. Live in the past or live in the future. Both are constraining. Both are limiting. Neither are conscious of the moment. So if you're busy, if you're focused out there and you're not focused here, what might you miss? Everything. You got it, literally. Everything that is. You don't see it. It doesn't register. If it doesn't register, do you get to remember it? Do you get to evaluate it? Do you get to learn from it?
No.
Wow. Does that sound like a wise way to live? Mm-hmm. How many people are, quote, hung up on past experiences? Oh, my parents hurt me. The people at school hurt me. My ex-wife or husband hurt me. My children hurt me years ago. I lost this person that I loved, or I lost this relationship that I wanted, or I lost this situation that I wanted, this job or this potential future. And there's the part of them at least is stuck in that. That's all of us, by the way. To one extent or another, there's something we're hanging on to, either in the past or an expectation of the future. It's everybody. And it doesn't benefit us. Some people feel that they need to be loyal to the past. What's tradition? Loyalty to the past. What's trying to be like mom and dad wanted us to be when we were kids, like we were told to be? That's loyalty to a past. It's not choosing to be conscious in the moment. It's not choosing to be conscious of our choices. It's not choosing to be who we are today. It's choosing to be, quote, loyal to something that doesn't exist. Truly doesn't exist. It's a memory, yet our subconscious minds often don't know that it's just a memory. It may have energy. Your karma has energy. It's kind of a memory of the past. It can be really strong energy with lots of emotions. Still just a memory. You don't have to live in the past. You don't have to live as the result of your impulses from past lives. You don't have to do that. You can defragment yourself. You can integrate yourself if you choose to. One of the main things that creates fragmentation is emotional wounds. Things we don't want to remember, things we don't want to be connected to in the past, things we don't want to realize about ourselves, things we don't want to reflect upon, things we don't want to understand. Those emotional wounds that happen create a situation where we fragment ourselves over and over and over again. So, If you've been fragmented by wounding, what's the solution that will reintegrate you?
Heal yourself.
Yes, exactly. If you heal yourself, you have the capacity to reintegrate yourself. Can you reintegrate yourself if you're not in harmony with yourself? If you're in judgment of yourself, can you be integrated? If you've got a bunch of disparate beliefs about what it being a good person or a bad person is, a good mother, a bad mother, a good father, a bad father, a good child or a bad child, do you see how beliefs of various kinds create fragmentation, create internal conflict, create internal disharmony, thus lack of conscious awareness of now? It's all dominoes. A ripple effect of a methodology that we have chosen for developing and learning as human beings. It need not be our methodology for personal development in the future. It need not be the way we choose to evolve. It is limited by its very nature. And yet, it's the set of training wheels we've had until now. We needed it. We needed fragmentation. We needed the concept of time. We needed to be able to repress the past rather than let it go and hide from it in a way, because it would have hurt us too much to be conscious of it, to work with it. We didn't have a way to be conscious and integrated in the past. We do have ways to be conscious and integrated now, if we choose to. Conscious awareness of the process of evaluating and understanding the fragmentation of your consciousness, how it's spread out across past, present, and future, is very important. And the process of integrating your consciousness is just as important. Through this process, you become empowered. Through this process, you become healed. Through this process, you become you.